Hey guys, happy Sunday, coming to you today. Hey guys, that was embarrassing. As I was editing, I realized that clip got lost. I was introducing where we were. It was in Cinque Terre in Italy on the Mediterranean. Anyway, so much for amateur video editing. I will get better at this. Alright, so back to Italy it goes. Keep in mind that our number one goal is to discontinue the use of opiates that are taken outside the realm of what's normal or what's good. So for example, opiates taken for treating your depression or anxiety or stress in life are not good opiates. Heroin, obviously, when people have gotten to the point where oxycodone, Percocet don't work anymore and they start using heroin, then that becomes a bad thing. So then what is the difference between the two? Well, first of all, we have to agree that nothing is as bad as taking opiates and taking heroin, because of the dependence and the tolerance and the addiction that we talked about. Destroys people's lives, creates them to lose their jobs, lose their income, have to steal sometimes to be able to get it. Legal issues, of course, felonies, jail time, all that stuff is not good. So what's the difference? Why do we choose Suboxone? Why do we choose methadone? Methadone was the first medication to come about many years ago, decades ago. Was developed as a synthetic opioid to basically block and jam up the opioid receptors. It is an opiate. People sometimes ask me, isn't that the same as legalized heroin? No, of course it's not. It's like saying insulin is like legalizing candy cookies and candy bars. We're not simply making an excuse by using one over the other. We're trying to achieve a goal, and that's what we have to ultimately talk about first before we even talk about what product we're going to use, because it becomes clear after we've talked about the goals that the product that you use to get to that goal doesn't really matter. The goal is to get rid of opioids, to get rid of heroin, get your life back, get you to the point where you can hold a job, you're not constantly looking for drugs, you're not constantly using your family's resources to buy those drugs. And that's the only goal. Hopefully not get any felonies or more felonies, lose your job. Those are the goals. Whatever it takes to get that job done. So for some people, originally methadone was the way to go. Methadone is a very long-acting opioid that sits in your brain and basically sits in the receptor so tightly and for such a long time and jams it full in such a slow manner that the brain does not achieve a high off of it. You don't get a high and you don't really feel anything off of it. All it does is replace the heroin, and it makes so that you don't have cravings, you don't have withdrawals, you don't have the need to go get heroin or oxy pills, and you are thereby able to actually have a life, go to work. You're not having withdrawals. One of the biggest things people tell me that is so hard to convince the lay public about is when heroin addicts come to me, and this is absolutely true, they usually use the words, I haven't gotten high off of this opiate or heroin for years now. All they're trying to do, and those of you who are going through this can affirm this, is you're trying to not be sick. You're basically using heroin to no longer be sick. What does that mean? Heroin addicts begin initially using oxy pills or Vicodin, Percocet pain pills that gives them a high, gives them a relaxed feeling, sometimes helps their depression, anxiety go away, and then over time that wears off. That's the tolerance we talked about. It doesn't work anymore, so it takes more. All the while, they begin to sink into these deeper and deeper withdrawal states if they don't have the opiates, if they don't have the heroin. Ultimately, they end up basically going below the water surface. If you look at the ocean and you imagine the level water surface is your normal life, they used to use opiates to get a high above the water, and then they drop back down to the water surface. But what happens to addiction and tolerance is patients go under the water. They go into withdrawals below the water, and the weeks and days and weeks and months are going by, and not only are they dipping back into the water, they're actually going lower than the water level. They're sinking further and further down under the water into that negative zone where they're basically living in withdrawals. And all the heroin then, all it does for them at that point is it brings them from negative 10 feet of water up to the surface so they can breathe a teeny bit for an hour or two, and then down they go back into the state of withdrawals at negative 10 feet below the water level. So when heroin addicts tell you they haven't felt a high for years, it's actually true. They're just going from negative 10 withdrawal state to maybe 0 for a brief period of time, and then right back down to negative 10. So most people are desperate to come off the heroin. So that's the goal. The goal is, and I always ask patients, what are your top 3 goals in life? And everybody answers the same question in the same way, and most of us do anyways. Number 1 is perhaps be able to hold a job, maybe pay our bills, pay rent, have good family relationships with our kids, be able to enjoy life and do the things we love to do. And everybody answers the same question. I don't care if I ask a banker who's a CEO of a top company doing heroin or anyone. Everybody has the same answer. Those are your goals. Those are my goals. Those are the next person's goals. Those are everybody's goals. We all have the same goals. We're all human. And so how do we achieve that? Number 1, you can try to wean down off of the heroin, or you can try to wean down off of the oxycodone or Percocet. I've never seen that work. I've done this for 20 years. People try. They say, well, I'm strong enough. It's a willpower. I can just willpower this. And they can't. It's not a willpower thing. We've proven that time and time again. It's not a willpower thing. It's actually a hardwired thing. And I'll talk about that some other day in the studies that we've done with PET scans and various types of studies that look at. This is actually hardwired stuff. This is like diabetes. This is like insulin. You cannot will your sugar levels down. It doesn't work. You have high sugar levels. You have diabetes. Deal with it. This is a disease like any other disease. We have to deal with it. So we have 2 choices. Either we try to wean down off the heroin, which again, like I said, I've never seen it work, but if you want to try it, most people have already tried it 100 times before they come to me in the first place. They don't show up to me without having done something on their own. Or we replace the heroin with something else. And by replace, I mean we're literally replacing it with methadone or Suboxone. Both products will jam up the opioid receptors. They're called mu receptors. It will jam them up. Not permanently, but very long lasting. What happens and why that's so useful is once those opiate receptors, the mu receptors, once they're jammed up with methadone or Suboxone, there's no more heroin going on and dropping off and going on and dropping off. That constant back and forth with opiates like heroin or oxy is what creates the tolerance in the first place. It's that constant short-acting narcotic that drops off your brain. That's what builds the tolerance. So now we have a substance like methadone or Suboxone that sits on your brain extremely tight. It does not let go. It will drop off, but it's basically very tight sticking, kind of like super glue, and it will not let go. It's like a cast on your brain. People always say, how is it going to heal my brain? You know, I always tell people it's the analogy. It's like healing a broken bone. How do we heal a broken bone? We actually don't. We don't heal anything. We stop the bone ends from moving. We create quiet. We put a cast around the broken arm. We create a quiet sphere around that broken, jagged edge of the bone. And then the glorious part is we let the body do its own thing, and it heals the bone on its own. We don't do a thing. We just stop it from moving. And the same with healing a brain with opioid receptor overuse. We basically put a cast on your brain. That's the Suboxone or the methadone. It locks your brain down. And we let it sit. We let it sit and heal. How long does that take? It depends, you know. If you have a broken arm, it takes 2 months for a cast, you know. People always ask, oh, I'd like to have a cast off in, you know, maybe in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. And I say, no, you're going to have the cast off at 2 months, and that's when we're taking the cast off. Not a week early, not a day early, not an hour early. And we all understand why, because we don't want to risk re-breaking the bone. You don't feel the cast, your bones feel fine, you're wondering why you have the cast on, I get it. But you know what? You're just going to keep that cast on, and you're not going to take it off. And in 2 months' time, we're going to take it off, and hopefully that the bone is healed. We can take x-rays of bones and prove that they're healed. We can't take x-rays of the brain and prove that it's healed. But statistically, the longer that cast is on your brain, and again, cast is the methadone or the Suboxone, the longer that lockdown medication is locking your brain down, the better chance you have of surviving and not relapsing long term. So how long does it take for a brain to heal? I usually say I like to have the methadone or Suboxone on your brain for, 6 months, 9 months without touching it. Again, you might feel completely normal, just like with a cast, and you might wonder, why do I have this thing on? Why do I have this medication? I feel normal. You have the medication because it needs to lock your brain down, because silent things are happening, healing your brain on the inside that you can't feel on the outside. Don't argue with why your cast has to stay on for 2 months on a broken arm, and don't argue why methadone or Suboxone have to stay on for 6 months or 9 months or a year. That's just how it is. Yes, we can always stop it sooner, and people do, and they relapse, and it takes a couple of times for them to understand the gig and realize what we're doing. But that's how it works. It's like a cast on your brain. I'm not going to elaborate right now here who does better with methadone, who does better with Suboxone. But needless to say, they are two medications that work very well in different settings. Sometimes people have success with one, but not with another. And you can't predict who's going to do well on what. Some people pretend they can predict that, but they can't. The drug companies will always pretend that they know best which medication works better for you, but they don't. They don't know that. More expensive is not better. Suboxone now has generic versions, which is fantastic. So things are getting cheaper and more affordable for people. Whatever it is, nothing's as expensive as spending $200-300 a day on heroin and opiates. Not to speak of the lost time and the lost wages, the lost opportunity in work, lost family relationships, and maybe even loss of life, whatever that's worth, priceless, as the commercial says, right? So that's really the difference. We'll use both. We'll use both in different times. The only thing that's important is for a patient to decide whether they are ready or not to take that step. How does it work? How do we get onto the Suboxone? How do we get onto the methadone? What's the procedure for all that stuff? I'll go through that on a different video. Really just wanted to make the point clear. Those are two medications that can work. They've helped with a lot of people, and they can work very well. People who are ready for it obviously are the ones that will succeed. There's no reason that you should not be able to succeed with one of those two tools. It's like a cast on a broken arm. There's very few casts that fail. The few casts that do fail, usually the kid that rips it off earlier, and I say kid, but I've had plenty of adults who've taken their casts off early too. Doesn't usually end well, but people try it, so whenever you're ready for it, again, call me, let's sit down, let's have the conversation. It's just discussion topic. If you come to me and say, hey, I'm doing heroin, I just wanted more information on how Suboxone, how methadone works, and Vivitrol, we'll talk about Vivitrol next time too. I'll give you that information. If you walk out of my office and say, hey, I'm not sure which one I want to do or how I want to work this or what, that's totally awesome. That's fine too. Just, let me know. We'll meet again some other day. My goal is just to give you the education, give you the information on what options you have. Your job is to figure out, are those options right for you? I know that sounds cliche from all those stupid pharmaceutical commercials, but it really is that way. If the options are right for you, then you'll make that choice, and then you'll do that with me, and we will walk through that together, and I will walk you through it step by step. I don't push people into medication. Some people are not ready for it yet. Some people are never ready for it, and some people walk in the first day saying, okay, I need to do one of these meds. It's time. I don't care which one. Let's get the job done. I'll work with you guys in either direction, okay? Have a great rest of the weekend, and stay alive.